And hey, welcome. This is Bridges Live Presents Talking with the Sarge. And I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Paul Dyer, and your other host is Sergeant James Spearman. James has been a police officer for his whole life. It just seems like he grew up in the police force. But more importantly, we like to have this show so you can have a communication, an understanding, a conversation with someone on the police force, because I think we get disconnected by a misconnection. I say that all the time. We think we know what the police is trying to do. We think we know what civilians are trying to do, and we just don't have those conversations. And this is what this program is to do, is to develop a communication, a community through understanding. By talking to a police officer, because our relationship with the police force, it's at an all-time low, it's at a disarray, and it has nothing to do with George Floyd. It has nothing to do with all the cases around the country of someone getting shot by a police officer, by another person. It's just a mistrust. And we're trying to correct that, because we cannot live in a community that has a mistrust with our police force. I don't think we can live that way. James, what do you think?
No, without police, there'd be anarchy. You know, you'd have people taking the law in their own hands, and that's not the kind of society that we should have. That's not the America that we all know and love. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done on both ends. And I think that this forum is one of the great starts of making that happen.
Because if we don't have forums like this, and I know I know you're retired. Let's get that out there straight. You're retired, so you don't have you have a stake in the game because you love what you have done. You love the service that you give. You love your brothers and sisters that are in blue, and you want them safe and you want them to come home. I think you ought to talk to that, because this is not about picking sides, but there is a danger to the job that you did for so many years.
Absolutely. There's always an inherent danger whenever you put that uniform on. It doesn't necessarily mean that you respond to a call or there's an emergency that you respond to where you can lose your life. You can simply have someone that doesn't like the police, or someone who has committed a crime, and they happen to see you and they react, and they take the officer's life unbeknownst to the officer. The person just either committed a violent crime, or it took someone else's life, and that's happened before. When you're wearing that uniform, you have a target on your back, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
How do you feel about doing a job knowing that there is a target on your back? I mean, that's got to still have a feeling to it. And we're not even talking about your service to community and why you put on a uniform. We're talking about how does that feel, because your fellow officers and like I say, your family in blue around the globe, they're not happy. I just know they're not happy. People get angry at cashiers when they're having a bad day, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. If you have a cashier that's having a bad day, like, you having a bad day, I need my groceries. We cannot have police officers having a bad day, but there's a lot of bad days.
Yeah, there is. But, you know, the thing about it is, when you go through that police academy and you go through the training, there's a lot that can be expected from that. And so we should and expect the fact that most of the times when we have contact with the public, it's going to be something negative. And that's been, over time, the biggest part of the problem. The only time someone sees a police officer when something bad happened or is about to be bad. So, meaning if you get pulled over, who wants to get pulled over and get a ticket? That's, you know, that could be enough to ruin your day just as an ordinary citizen. So,
but when you're doing 150-mile zone, you're gonna get a ticket.
Yeah.
I mean, we shouldn't be all too surprised when the blue lights come on and we're like, we're doing 75 in a 55.
Well, that's one of the things that's always been amazing to me. I've noticed that our society has become more and more entitled, and having developed that mindset, people feel like they can do what they want and they shouldn't be questioned by it, and they don't really think about the consequences, and that poses a whole nother set of issues, and it makes things hard when it doesn't have to be.
So I want to get into this week, and I'm so glad we're able to have this forum. And James, I think you're just a beautiful person because you get a lot of fiery questions sometimes. But here's the thing I want to ask you is there something that we can do as citizens that will let you know we support you? I'm not talking about waving flags and thank you for your service. Is there something a community can give to a police officer to say, we support you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's no great big well thought out plan. It doesn't have to be that dynamic. You can just simply say thank you, and when you're in the position to do so, show that support. I actually had that happen to me once. On several occasions, but the one that stands out the most for me was on a traffic stop, and this young man was totally misguided, and I don't really know what was going through his mind. I was in a marked police car on Forest Drive, which is the main thoroughfare in Annapolis, and the speed limit is 40. He went past me at 50, and he looked me right in the face as if to say, "Yep, I'm going to pass you, and what are you going to do about it?" So I got in behind him. I got a pace of 50 miles an hour. I pulled him over, and right then and there, he started in on me. And so because of I don't know what it was, but because of the age difference, I switched from police to father, and I really let him have it. And I mean, I made no bones about it. I really broke it down to him because I saw that could have been my son. And I looked at it as though if this would be another police officer, he could get hurt. And I was trying to explain to him that he was making some bad decisions and his attitude was not going to give him a promise of future. Unbeknownst to me, there was a young lady who stopped, and I was so angry with this young man that I got tunnel vision and I didn't even see her standing there. And she came up and she said, "Young man, I don't know what you did or what you said, but you owe him an apology because I've never seen him this angry before." And so that was a shocking moment for me because I never had that happen before. But if you don't have to necessarily jump in and help make an arrest or anything like that, but kind gestures. I've had people buy me coffee. I've had people buy my lunch or buy dinner, and I don't even know who they were. They would just pick the tab up while I'm in the restaurant. I've had people send their children over to shake my hand or hug me, or I take pictures with them and things of that nature. So there are people out there that show that support. I would like to see that occur more in our culture because more often than not, it's been people from other cultures that have shown that generosity.
That's true. Just black people don't say thank you to police officers. Is it because we have this ingrained growth connotation that the police are the bad people, or it's the man, right? We call it the man. Yes. And the man has this thing of this white ominous large monster. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it's the man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that comes along with the history, the history that law enforcement has played in the roles that they played in our lives as in our culture, and I think that that's continuing now when you see all of the things that are taking place all over the country that we've spoken on many times before. These things are only pushed the black community and policing further apart. And so I don't ever want to be in a situation where I say blame the victim, but we as people also have to keep things in its proper perspective. There have been times where I've seen blacks who have been dealing with the police and they were right, but they went too far and they ended up getting arrested when they made their point sufficiently, but they just didn't know when to stop or how to stop. And at that point, their point was no longer valid anymore because they went too far and it got drowned in the emotion and the bad decision making.
As people know, I teach a lot of emotional science and the reaction of emotional science. And you said gone too far. Is there a time where, and I know this is perceptional, it is by per person, per time, per event, the whole bit. I get it. If it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon, total different atmosphere than 9:30 p.m. at night. You know what I mean? So the neighborhood changes, everything changes. But when can someone say when can you let someone know, like, hey, you're going too far, you better settle down? They don't hear those words when you're trying to give them advice.
Yeah, they don't. And, a lot of times when these interactions occur, we've already been called there for a problem. By and large, these things don't occur as a happenstance. Usually we respond to a disturbance or loud music complaint or loud party complaint or people hanging on the corner. And so when we show up, the guards are already up. And so in the heat of the moment, people want to save face. They don't want to feel like they've been punked. They don't want to feel like they've been dominated by the man, as you so eloquently put it. But, at the end of the day, getting arrested doesn't solve your problem. You're not making a point by getting arrested. You're just getting a criminal charge. You're inconveniencing yourself. You're going to have to go to court and you're going to have to answer the judge as to, and it's embarrassing because you're going to be facing a whole lot of people in the courtroom. You're not going to be in there by yourself. And it's just not worth it. If you have a job, you've taken time off from work to appear before the judge and you have to explain yourself. And I'm talking about disorderly conducts, those types of things. I'm not talking about those other crimes where you really have to have evidence and proof. And I'm talking about the urinating in public, fighting in public, that sort of thing.
I was going to ask you about that. It was on my mind about the urination in public or public intoxication. These are low-level crimes, but yet they're still a crime.
Yes.
I don't want you to make law because you're not a legislator, right? You're not a judge. But what do you think about those type of offenses? Is there a different way that we could handle this?
Well, generally what we do is we give people criminal citations for those. So if we are satisfied with the person's residency, their identity and things of that nature, we really don't usually take them into custody. We usually give them a criminal citation right then and there and let them go. Now, if they present a problem in the public, if they want to start yelling and screaming and they want to be belligerent and they start creating more of a problem than it's worth, then they usually get taken into custody. We don't really have the choice to determine what a real crime is. We have to enforce the laws.
Right.
And all of the laws that are on the books are there for a reason. And we as an adult, we as adults and we as human beings have to learn to put ourselves in other people's shoes. Now, people may on the surface say, oh, urinating in public, that's no big deal. Well, how would you feel if you walked up on this person and he's urinating on your car? Urinating on your front step. We're not talking about people who are in the bushes just urinating on the bush. We're talking about people who urinate on businesses, they urinate on cars, they urinate on other people's property. And that can cause a potential disturbance there, because when the owner comes out, they're not going to be happy.
Now, and this is where we talked about before, where mental health is an issue. Mental health is an issue in the black community. Mental health is an issue in America.
Yes.
Isn't there something like this is a mental health issue? Because even though they're urinating on someone's car, yes, it's a crime. Yes, we're not even going to talk about the disgust of this, but
sure.
Something's wrong.
Well, when police come in contact with people like that, they're usually intoxicated or they're on drugs. So at that point, unless they show some other symptoms other than being intoxicated or under the influence of drugs, we would never know what that mental illness would be. I'm a trained crisis interventionist, and I can pick out odd behavior, human behavior, more so than the average police officer. And but by and large, when you see someone who's intoxicated, you're focused on the intoxication. You're not really focused on the mental health aspect of it.
Do you think? And I'm going to preface this question because it's what James thinks, not what police officers around the globe think. And sometimes we got to think when people hear the show and they're like, well, Sergeant James has been on the force 33 years. He doesn't think that's a big idea. We're talking about what you think. And Maryland and Annapolis, it gets narrow, right?
Sure.
If we're in Mardi Gras, you cannot be peeing in public because we can't have 50,000 people peeing in public, right?
Right.
What can we do to bring mental health services on board before they get into the drunk tank or those places? Because it just seems like I'm thinking about not bottling up the court,
right?
Not having unnecessary arrests. Because when people get arrested, it ruins a life. It ruins a career, ruins a job, it ruins there's different certifications a person may eventually would like to get, they can't get anymore, even if it's a misdemeanor crime.
Mm-hmm. Well, right now in the state of Maryland, we only have the one criteria, and that is the person has to, as far as police encounters, the person has to be a danger to themselves or others. And that's usually when we get involved. We're usually involved in the back end, and that's what the public doesn't understand. A lot of people criticize the police for how they handle people who are suffering from mental illness, but they don't realize we don't get called when the person is just showing a mild symptom. We're called when the person's about to do something or is already doing something, and we're trying to regain control of the situation. That's where de-escalation is important. I think as we're kind of limited in what we can do as police, but I think what has to happen is a holistic approach where we start to really amplify the need for mental health services. And I think that there needs to be a push for affordable mental health services. A lot of people can't afford the services that they require. the medication is outrageous. I have a niece, and she's got a mental illness, and she was released from the hospital, and the doctor told us that they could give her a shot that would last her 30 days, but it's $1,200 a month.
Right.
And we can't afford that.
No.
That's a mortgage.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
But the other alternative that she has is the oral medication, and that's the problem. She's refusing to take it. So we have to find a way to create mental health awareness and eliminate that stigma, and really get people to take it seriously, and really try to give family members the tools they need to support their loved one before they go into crisis.
In the time of your services, and it's about 33 years, and let people know it's been 33 years, have you thought about a community or a section of a community that just pretty much gave up? And what did that look like?
Well, I mean, if you look at a lot of the neighborhoods in Baltimore, specifically North Avenue, that's a lot of despair. There's a lot of hurt.
Yeah.
There, people are crying out for help and attention, and they're not getting it.
I worked at a shelter in Fremont, North Fremont, and I'm telling you, it's almost chaos. I mean, it's literally, I'm walking around the streets and all the things are going on. All the things going on. And there are two cops sitting there, and I don't even know what they could do because there's so much going on. They literally are in chaos, and there's nothing for them to really do. Otherwise, more chaos would probably erupt. So they're probably biding their time to see how far this, I wonder what they're thinking, because I actually went up to them. I say, "You guys okay?" They're like, "Is this like this every night?" They're like, "Yeah, bro. This is like this." I'm like, this is insane. I mean,
it's overwhelming. I was assigned to an area in Annapolis, and I was assigned to what was called the Neighborhood Enhancement Team.
Okay.
And when they put me out there, they gave me no tools. They just put me out there and told me to walk foot patrol and make citizen contacts and do what you could do. Well, that's like putting your finger in a geyser. I mean, there's very little that I could do with something like that. I can make citizen contacts and I can make friends and things like that, but I can't get somebody a job. I can't get people off of drugs and alcohol, and I can't get their kids out of juvie. I can't,
prostitution,
help them with their credit and prostitution. I can't, stop their kids from wanting to be on the gangs and sell drugs and all of that. You get overwhelmed. And a lot of times the people don't realize officers get overwhelmed and they get jaded because they are handed, depending on where you live or depending on where you work, you're handed a fixed deck, and then you're expected to win.
So what does that conversation sound like to the officers, leadership? I mean, they know where you are. They know that everybody knows the neighborhood. If you haven't driven through it, they've been around it. They know what goes on because it doesn't change. And people, when I tell you that the place I'm talking about where I was in North Fremont, there was prostitution, drug sales, young kids. I'm not talking young kids as 13. I'm talking 8-year-olds. And this was like 10 o'clock at night. I don't even know if there's a parent around. I mean, there's these young kids riding these bikes, wheeling through whatever, tricycles. It was, I was like, is this a movie set? Is this like real? Is this, these are the lives of what people are talking about? And it was like that throughout the week because I was down there and I was just like, I was just taking it in, trying to figure out, is this an anomaly or is this consistent? And it's consistent.
It's consistent. The only way that you could ever make any headway with anything like this, you'd have to have a sustained social program that attacks all sources of the trauma. Unemployment, adequate housing, quality education, family services, sex education, drug education, alcohol education, all of those things, mental health services, nutrition, all of the things that we take for granted, being in the middle class or and above, all of those things that we take for granted, those are the resources that need to be approached when you're talking about those neighborhoods.
Rudy Giuliani, when he said he's been dubbed the head of New York, of cleaning up New York, he locked everybody up. That's all he did. He locked everybody up. Yes. I mean, Sing Sing went from a population of Rikers, he locked everybody up. He didn't care who it was. He locked people were like, okay, no. That's how 42nd Street and that they all got. We can't lock up everyone.
Well, we're already suffering the effects of that because all those people that you locked up are out,
right?
And their kids are adults. They don't have that relationship because they haven't been around. And you also have to realize when you're incarcerated for an extended period of time, your life is on hold. You're not up on the latest technologies. You're not up on the latest ways of doing things. You're not up on all the changes that you missed out on that we see and take for granted in our everyday life. When you're in jail, you're not privy to the fact that now you're not filling out a paper job application. Right. You're doing it online. You have to have an email address. You have to have cell phones. You have to learn how to operate the apps on the phones, and you're left out of the loop with all of those things.
But the police are tasked with this duty, and I don't think it's the police officer's duty. And I want to get back to that. One of the questions I have is, people talk about socialism, capitalism, all these isms, government ideas of how to run a country, a city, and yet there is no politics in the streets as a police officer. So every time they put those isms up there and you're still walking the beat, it's still a human being, law enforcement, citizen.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. Well, you also have to look at how we got there. We are the only entity that's open 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. And when someone's in crisis, who else are you going to call? When someone needs help, when there's a problem, who else are they going to call? You can't call social services at 8 o'clock. I mean, at 8 o'clock at night. You can't call them at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm not saying that we have to have a 24-hour social services. What I'm saying is, the police are going to be there. You need to give them the tools and you need to give them the means to be able to help people. And we have to reimagine law enforcement. And I believe that can be done. But the leadership and the law enforcement executives who are in charge have to change their attitude because, like you said, we have too many Rudy Giulianis running around with badges, and they have gold badges, and they're telling the underlings what to do. And that's, all crimes are not criminal. Some of them are social. Mm-hmm. And if you are properly trained and you have half a brain, you can distinguish between a real criminal and someone who is social, who is suffering from social effects of their environment.
What's some of those ways that you're thinking that we could do? Like, what's some of those ideas you have in your head?
Well, I believe that we should be able to broker services for people, and we should be able to have contacts with real programs that are going to help people where they are. Teenage pregnancy is something that is overlooked. And when you made the comment that you made about 8-year-olds out on a tricycle in the middle of the night, I have seen young teenage mothers who are pushing strollers with their babies in the middle of the night. And I've asked them why they weren't in the house.
Right.
And they would tell me that their mother said, well, if you were old enough to have the baby, then you're old enough to deal with it. And I'm not going to watch it. It's your problem, not mine. And I thought that was a horrid thing to say to a teenage mother. But unfortunately, it's more common than not. I've heard a lot of women say that to their kids. And not only is it not healthy for that teenage mother, she's not learning anything.
Right.
But it's also terribly unhealthy for the child. The child doesn't have a schedule. The child is not in a safe environment. They should be in bed. You should be making sure that they are getting their proper nutrition, their proper amount of rest. You should be making sure that they're clean, and all of those things that play into their health and quality of life. We have to really work toward improving the quality of life of our citizens, especially the ones who don't have that quality of life.
And I don't think that people who have quality of life, I wonder if they think about the many who don't. I do wonder, because I know if I work in a shelter, if I'm wherever I'm at, when I'm doing what I do, and I'm there because I believe in service, I wonder if people do they ever think about that quality of life that many don't have? And I don't even know what they could do. You know, we really need their hands instead of their money. We need them in action instead of saying, "Well, yes, I'll write you a $20, donation for your homeless shelter or clothing drive." We don't need that. We need you.
No, you can't throw money at a social issue.
No,
because if that was the case, we wouldn't have the issues. There are just so many things that go into play when you live in that kind of environment that affect you in a negative way. If you don't start to address those things, you're not going to come out with a positive outcome. And just throwing a check at a program is not going to cut it. One of the things that our kids suffer from is lack of exposure.
Yeah.
There are kids that live in Baltimore who have grown up in Baltimore who've never left Baltimore before. There are kids in Annapolis right now who have never left Annapolis before. They have never left as much less left the state. And there are a lot of things that kids don't get the opportunity to do. Travel. They don't get the opportunity to go on vacations. They don't get the opportunity to visit other countries or visit other parts of the country to really see how big the United States of America is. And I think one of the things that probably hurt the Black community was when a lot of us stopped going into the service.
Yes.
A lot of people, when a good portion of our culture decided that they didn't want to go into the service, they didn't want to go into the military, that's when things started to break down, because those young men and women got to go over to places like Thailand and really see that the ghetto that you living in is Taj Mahal compared to what they have.
Yeah.
And we start to learn to appreciate, and we as Americans, we have that entitlement. And until we break that down, we're going to continue to have these problems.
I mean, I don't want to, because we can definitely get into what you say a political, because, you know, we have Israel being bombed, Hezbollah is bombing the PLO. We got 100 rockets going into a city. 100 rockets. Yeah. Could you, if people could imagine 100 rockets, I don't think they can. People can't even imagine 100 rockets on the 4th of July. You can't imagine 100 rockets hitting your city.
No. I think that if we were really going to throw money at a problem, I think we should have a comprehensive student exchange program where our kids would have to go, regardless of what school you went to, you'd have to go to some of these indigenous countries and really see how good you have it.
Why don't we have more ride-alongs? I mean, I know there's all these. I know the many police stations, many areas have come. You can ride along with the police officers, see what we do, be a part of what we do. Why can't we just make this a part of a service where it's? I don't want to. I don't want to use that M word, mandatory, but I almost want to say it. Like, because if we don't say you have to do it, why would they do it?
You're right. And I mean, I'm trying to stay away from the politics, but when you start going into using words like socialism and things of that nature, like you said, when you give people freedom of choice and they don't know any better, why would they, you know, it's just like when we were kids, your mother would tell you to eat your vegetables. Who wants to eat vegetables? But that was for their own good. Mm-hmm. They knew that, you know, they wanted us to be healthy, and that was what we needed to do to stay healthy, is eat your vegetables and get your rest and bedtimes and all of those other things that our parents told us to do. It wasn't for anything but your own good. And until we go in and try to create scenarios where we're correcting some of these problems, you can call it socialism all you want to, but I thought that when you pay your taxes, your government is supposed to service its citizens, and it's supposed to help people.
Yeah, that's why we pay a certain amount of taxes and enough at that. And now we have where we have jobs, but not enough people being hired or applying. I'm not even sure which one it is. We have all these jobs and not enough people hiring or not enough people qualified. It's a funny conundrum we're in. We're like I need people to work, but people are not wanting to work. Like,
well, you also have people that are working for the wrong reasons. And when I said that, they walk in with an attitude like, you know, I want a job, so since I want a job, you should just give it to me. I'm not going to do the best I can do to build your company. I'm just going to show up and collect a paycheck. You know, you can see that when you go in some of the stores, and when you ask someone for service, they look at you like you want to borrow money from them. You know, it's like, how dare you ask me to do my job? You know, so when you have, as long as you have people that develop those attitudes, you know, it's part of the problem.
I never want to talk in doom and gloom. I don't, because I want people to always look on the happy side of life. But let's really talk about where this could really go when people really start to. I think people have a mistrust, and I think some people have a distrust.
Sure.
And if we talk in certain percentages, if we have a majority of people go into distrust in the police force, where do you think that city would look like, or that community would look like? What I mean, I can imagine almost like the Mad Max syndrome, where it becomes like just I can't imagine what the turmoil it would be when people truly distrust.
Well, you're already seeing it. If you go and you pay attention to Portland, Oregon, if you go and you see Seattle, Washington, and all of the things that are taking places in those two cities, that's a picture of where we're headed. And our leaders are failing us because they're not stepping in and addressing the issues. You know, everybody wants to complain about the protesters, but no one's going up to the protester saying, what is it that you're protesting and how can we stop this? What is it that you are looking for? And when you ask those questions, if that person can't give you an answer, then that's the troublemaker. That's the one that goes to jail. So if you have that person who's willing to sit down and talk to you and say, we want this, we're looking for that, we need this, we need that. Now you can start going and you can working toward building a solution and a plan to restore order. You just can't go and send a bunch of cops in wearing riot gear and just imposing their will and their authority on people and thinking that that's going to solve the problem. There was a reason why they were protested in the first place.
If anyone have any questions, and I see we have someone that's on the line with us here, but if anyone have any questions, whether it be on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or any other social medias, have any questions for the Sarge, you can put it in the inbox and I will get to it and I will see it and I'll catch it. So throughout the week, people know you have these shows. What's some of the questions that you've gotten about misunderstanding that we can clear up today? One or two questions that you often get, like, what about this? And you're like, let me address that.
Yeah. The biggest question I get is surrounding the LEOBR here in Maryland. And
please explain what that is.
It's called the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights. And it was a bill that was drafted to give police officers certain protections when they're under investigation.
Okay.
And there's been a mad push for it to be repealed. And so it's created a lot of controversy. And the problem is it hasn't been adequately explained. Most people don't really know what the true meaning of the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights is or what its purpose is. And so since people have not been properly educated on that, I try to give them as much information as I can.
So let's explain it. Go.
So Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights is a set of rights and protections for police officers in the performances of their duties. And it's most people think it's for anything, and it will protect the officer from anything and give them impunity to break the law and so on and so forth. And that's not the case at all. The Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights was created to protect the officers, to give them due process when dealing with management within any given police department. On an average day, or when LEOBR came into play, an officer, when he's under investigation for anything, and most of the time these are policy violations. These are don't have anything to do with crime.
Okay.
It does not shield you from crime. Say an officer gets a brutality complaint.
Okay.
And citizen comes forward and they say, hey, Officer Spearman roughed me up. He did this, he did that. He put the handcuffs on too tight. I didn't do anything wrong. He violated my rights, yada, 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 yada. So within this situation, this is not criminal. This would be administrative. So the police department would be investigating the incident based on policy violations. So I would be called in and I would be questioned, but I would have a right to have representation just like anybody else would. And giving you the Reader's Digest version, I could have a lawyer present and they would represent me.
Hold on. For those young people who even know what a Reader's Digest is,
an abbreviated version.
Those are he's giving you the Cliff Notes. People know them. Yeah. When you said Reader's Digest, I just had to say, okay, first of all, people who are under 50, there used to be a book called the Reader's Digest, and there was tons of stories in there, and then there were short stories. But thank you that was cute. Reader's Digest version. Oh, the TV Guide version, right? Remember the TV Guide?
TV Guide. Even that, they don't know what that is.
No. God. And the fathers used to collect them. My mother used to collect the TV Guide. Don't throw that away. So-and-so is on the cover.
Yes. Yes. Oh, yeah. What I mean, the abbreviated version would be when the internal affairs investigator would call me in to question me about the incident. Anything that I say could and would be used against me in this investigation. So therefore, I would have the right to be represented by an attorney. Okay. So it goes through the normal process. There are some other things that I don't want to beleaguer the conversation with, but in this particular case, they would investigate the allegation to see if it was what we call sustained, which means that I would be guilty of the violation, whether it be excessive force, brutality, or what have you. If it rose to the criminal level, the law enforcement officer Bill of Rights would not shield me from that. The case will be forwarded to the state's attorney's office, and they would review it, and they could still prosecute me. There are some other things. If I'm involved in a shooting, it used to be 10 days before I could be questioned, but now it was reduced to 5. Things like that, and that had nothing to do with whether cover up or anything like that. Whenever someone goes through a traumatic experience, they're not going to remember all the details. If you ask them something right then and there, they're not going to give you all the details that you would think they should. And there have been times where officers had been accused of hiding facts or even lying because the officer was questioned the same day or right then and there as to what happened, and they were deemed to be lying or covering something up, and so on and so forth. So law enforcement officer Bill of Rights was developed to give the officers protections from the management of the agency, not the public, or not protection from the law within itself.
This has nothing to do with wrongful shootings, misshootings, over-exerted force, but being in the service, and when we used to have to give a recap of a firefight, it was almost like, what do you mean you want to know what happened? You want to know what? Like, what do you, like, it's almost puzzling to, you're asking a question, it happened so fast. There's things going, and you're like, well, tell me what happened. We got shot at. I mean,
yes. When adrenaline takes over and it's fight or flight, those dynamics kick in, and you're not sitting there recording what's going on. You're seeing what you can do to survive in that moment, and you try to remember it later. And when adrenaline wears off, your body's going through those changes. Your mind is going through those changes.
There's a chemical dumps, man.
Yes. I think one of the biggest issues that we have is that a lot of people don't understand how difficult it is to be a police officer from the standpoint of the changes that the body goes through.
Right.
You can have an adrenaline rush 5 or 6 times in one day, and that plays a toll on your body. It takes a toll on your psyche. It's mentally draining. It's psychologically draining, and that career is not as simple as most people would believe it to be. And that's one of the things that's disappointing to me, that the people who should be speaking on this are not, and they're not educating the public So often I've heard people say that police officers are not above the law. They're no better than I am, things like that. And no, police officers are no better than the next human being, but their level of responsibility is different. And police officers take an oath. The average citizen doesn't take an oath to do their job. And they don't go through the stresses and the strains that police officers go through on a day-to-day basis.
We've talked about this a little bit. I was thinking about this. I was writing this article, and being a military serviceman, being a person I am in my life, and as you know, as a traveling person, as a traveling man, we have taken oaths more than most people have taken a loaf of bread. We've taken an oath. You know what I mean? We've literally raised our hand and said, I will.
I will. Yes.
I shall.
Yes.
I mean, and you think about the average person, you're right, the average person, when have they had a code of conduct that they are saying, I will?
Yes. Yes.
The people you run into, probably you really couldn't, there's not many.
No. And that goes back to what I was saying about military service, and if someone is not able to do regular military service, I think that there should be something
paramilitary, something like that.
Yes, something paramilitary that would give young men and women the discipline they need if they needed it.
Like Israel, 1 to 2 years mandatory.
Yes, and give them a real sense of commitment. Give them a sense of dedication, loyalty, expectation. Too many of our kids are growing around with no expectations. No expectations. When you live a life of no expectation, how can you expect that person to perform in a manner
which is funny, if you have no expectations, you can't expect.
No.
I mean, you literally already put the no in front of expectations, so there is none. I mean, you can't. I mean, so it's literally just wiped away, and that's
yes. And that's why we have the problems that we have, because we have so many of our youth who live a life of no expectations,
and no oaths. No oaths. I just think I think that's why people were so upset when we took out the Pledge of Allegiance. It was something about the Pledge of Allegiance was an oath to America, right?
Yes.
That's really what it was. It wasn't a religious thing. It wasn't it was just us joining one voice saying, I will for America. Now, we all have our different views of America, but at least this one thing we could say, I pledge to.
Well, one of the things that is missed in all of this is that freedom isn't free. This country wasn't built for free. And it is the best country in the world. And our way of life is being attacked from the inside and from the outside. And we need leaders to stand up and really take a look at our people and really put them in position to be successful. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you want your people to be successful? Because if you're successful, I'm successful. And we have so many people who are being ignored. We have so many young people who are being cast aside. Mm-hmm. It's if we don't get a handle on this, our way of life over time is not going to be what it used to be.
And I don't want to make short or light of when you say over time. I think time is short. We're running.
Yes.
We have a window. Yes. And I don't want to be, and trust me, I'm not I really believe in the blessings of Almighty High. I really do. We can come out of it. But trust me, I think the window's closing.
It is. It is. When you start thinking about global warming, when you start seeing um, all of you got this pandemic. There may be more to come. Um, we need leadership more now than ever before on all levels. We need to stop playing politics, and we need to do the right thing for each other. Um, uh, when you have someone in a position of power and someone presents them with an idea, it shouldn't make a difference whether it comes from a Democrat or a Republican. If we're going to benefit from it, I think we should run with it as fast as we can, and take heed of that and give that person their credit. It shouldn't matter who the person is. If it's a good idea, let's take it and let's run with it and try to improve our own way of life or preserve our own way of life.
There was a movie with Bruce Willis, and I try to remember, it was also Denzel Washington, but they ended up taking over Brooklyn. They were looking for terrorists, and the president or the liaison of the president saying, well, let's bring in the military to try to solve this terrorist problem because they're hiding in Brooklyn. Let's just bring the military in. And Bruce Willis says, you don't want to bring the military in because that's not our job, is to police people. You know, we are a broadsword. We will cut things, and a lot of things will get cut, and it's not going to be pretty. And I don't think, being in other countries, I don't think the American citizens still believe that we cannot go to martial law if we keep going this way. But I want to tell you something. I believe it's been more in the thoughts of people that why don't we pull the trigger on martial law? And civilians have no idea. They keep acting the fool, and they're going to be like, okay, we need to shut this down with a quickness, and we're going to bring in these things, and it's not going to look pretty.
No, it's not, and nobody wins.
No.
Nobody wins, and that's the fear that I have. We're fighting amongst ourselves on the inside. Well, who's paying attention to what's going on the outside. We have other countries who hate us and despise us for whatever reason, and we are the last world superpower, and they want nothing less than to make sure that we are no longer in that position.
I mean, look what they did with that pipeline.
Yes.
I mean, simple thing as that. We are in trouble. The Northeast is in trouble for like 3 days with oil and gas.
Yes.
All right, my brother, another great show. And anyone have any questions and you can't get on now, you can always inbox us, talk to us later. But again, we're talking with the Sergeant James Spearman. We're going to be doing this collectively, weekly, to talk to you, to have a conversation, to build community, to build relationships, and talk to a veteran and say, hey, call in and say, thank you for your service, Sergeant Spearman, and say, I live in this state and I have this question and I saw a police officer do this. What do you think? I mean, that's what we're here for, and that's what we want to do. Because if we don't build a relationship, then it falls apart.
Yes, wholeheartedly agree.
Thank you, brother. You have a great night. And congratulations, Grandpa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 5.
Yes, I hope everyone gets home safe, and I hope everyone is blessed and stays safe. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Take care.